The distant sound of a gunshot echoed across the Montana prairie as Zara Kingsley ducked behind her father's general store, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. It was 1875, and Miles City was still more promised than civilization, a dusty outpost where the law bent easily to the will of men with money and power. Zara wiped her hands nervously on her apron, the summer heat causing perspiration to bead along her hairline despite the early morning hour. At 22, she had become accustomed to unwanted attention from men passing through town, but Edward Blackburn was different. As the son of the region's wealthiest cattle baron, he viewed her not as a potential wife, but as an acquisition to be claimed. "Miss Kingsley," Edward's voice carried from around the corner, smooth as polished silver but with an edge that made her stomach tighten. "Your father and I have been discussing our arrangement. I believe it's time we finalized matters." Zara stepped out, chin raised despite her fear. Her father's mounting debts had emboldened Edward, whose loans had kept the store afloat after the harsh winter decimated their profits. "There is no arrangement, Mr. Blackburn," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "My father may owe you money, but I am not part of any collateral." Edward's handsome face hardened, his blue eyes narrowing. At 28, he had inherited both his father's business acumen and his legendary temper. "Your father seems to disagree. He signed the papers this very morning." "What papers?" Zara's voice cracked. "Marriage papers." Edward pulled a folded document from his vest pocket. "Effective immediately, you are promised to me. The ceremony will be held next Sunday." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. "My father would never, your father would do anything to avoid debtor's prison," Edward cut in. "Including seeing his only daughter well provided for." "This is 1875, Mr. Blackburn, not the Dark Ages. I will not be traded like cattle," Zara said, backing away as he stepped closer. Edward's smile disappeared. "You have little choice in the matter. This territory respects a binding contract and a woman's duty to honor her family's commitments." "I have not signed anything," Zara countered, her back now pressed against the rough wooden wall of the store. "Your signature is not required." Edward reached for her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "But your obedience is." When Zara tried to pull away, Edward's face contorted with rage. His free hand rose in a swift arc and Zara braced herself for the blow. It never came. "I'd reconsider that move, Blackburn." The voice was low and dangerous. Zara opened her eyes to see a tall figure standing behind Edward, the morning sun casting his shadow long across the dirt. In his right hand, a Colt revolver gleamed, its barrel pressed firmly against Edward's ribs. "This doesn't concern you, Barrett," Edward snarled, though his raised hand slowly lowered. "A man raising his hand to a lady always concerns me," the stranger replied, his voice carrying the slight drawl of Texas. Edward released Zara's arm, turning to face the interloper. "Ethan Barrett." "Still playing hero after all these years. I thought the war would have beaten that foolishness out of you." Ethan Barrett kept the gun steady, his green eyes never leaving Edward's face. "Step away from the lady." Edward adjusted his vest, a cold smile spreading across his features. "You're interfering with a private matter between a man and his betrothed." "I am not his betrothed," Zara interjected, rubbing her arm where Edward's fingers had left red marks. "Miss Kingsley has made her position clear," Ethan said. "I suggest you respect it." Edward's eyes darted between Ethan's face and the gun. "My father will hear about this." "I'm counting on it," Ethan replied evenly. "Now walk away while you still can." With a final venomous glance at Zara, Edward turned and stalked toward the main street, his expensive boots kicking up dust with each angry step. Only when he had disappeared from view did Ethan holster his weapon. He turned to Zara, his stern expression softening. "Are you hurt, Miss Kingsley?" Zara shook her head, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. "No, thanks to you, Mr. Barrett." She tucked a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "How do you know who I am?" A hint of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "Everyone knows Joseph Kingsley's daughter." Your father helped me outfit my first cattle drive 3 years ago. Ethan Barrett stood a head taller than most men in the territory, his frame lean but powerful from years of hard work. His face bore the weathered look of someone who spent most days under the open sky, and a scar ran along his jawline, a souvenir from the war that had ended a decade earlier. "I should thank you properly," Zara said, gathering her composure. "Would you care for some coffee?" Father just brewed a fresh pot before he left for the bank. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "That would be welcome. It's been a long ride from my ranch." Inside the store, Zara poured 2 cups of strong black coffee, her hands still trembling slightly. "Mr. Barrett, about what Edward said, those papers he claims my father signed, call me Ethan," he interrupted gently. "And don't worry about Blackburn. His father may own half the county, but even they can't force a woman to marry against her will. Not legally." "You don't know the Blackburns," Zara said quietly. "Victor Blackburn has the territorial governor in his pocket. If he wants something, he finds a way to make it legal." Ethan's expression darkened. "I know them better than you might think." He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes distant. "The Blackburns and I have history." Before Zara could inquire further, the store door swung open and her father hurried in, his face ashen. Joseph Kingsley was a man worn thin by worry, his once robust frame now stooped with the weight of financial troubles. "Zara, thank God you're safe." He embraced his daughter, then noticed Ethan. "Barrett, what brings you to town?" "Your daughter had some trouble with Edward Blackburn," Ethan said evenly. "I happened to be passing by." Joseph's face crumpled. "Oh, Zara, I'm so sorry. I never agreed to any marriage. Victor Blackburn came to me this morning with papers for a new loan, but I refused to sign when I saw the terms." "What terms?" Zara asked, dread building in her stomach. "He wanted to forgive our debts in exchange for—" Joseph couldn't finish the sentence. "In exchange for Zara," Ethan completed, his voice hard. Joseph nodded miserably. "I told him I'd rather lose everything than sell my daughter's future. He wasn't pleased." "So Edward lied," Zara said, relief washing over her. "There are no marriage papers, not yet," Joseph cautioned. "But Victor threatened to call in all our debts immediately. We don't have the money, Zara. The store, our home, we could lose everything." Ethan set his cup down with deliberate care. "How much do you owe, Joseph?" "More than I could raise in a year," Joseph admitted. "Almost $2,000. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "I might be able to help with that." "I couldn't possibly accept," Joseph began. "Not charity," Ethan cut in. "Business. I'm driving 500 head of cattle to the railhead in 3 weeks. I need supplies and another wagon. Plus, I could use someone with a good head for numbers to manage the books during the drive." Joseph straightened, hope lighting his tired eyes. "You'd hire me for the drive, at top wages," Ethan confirmed. "Enough to make a significant dent in what you owe. And I'll advance the money for your most pressing debts." "But what about the store?" Zara asked. "I can't manage it alone, not with the Blackburns looking for revenge." Ethan's gaze met hers. "You could come with us." "On a cattle drive?" Zara couldn't hide her surprise. "That's no place for a woman." "My sister Charlotte manages the cook wagon on every drive," Ethan explained. "She could use the help and you'd be safe from Blackburn. Close the store for a month." Joseph wavered. "Better than losing it forever," Ethan pointed out. Joseph looked at his daughter. "What do you think, Zara?" Zara considered the offer. Leaving Miles City meant abandoning everything familiar, but staying meant facing Edward's growing obsession and his father's financial stranglehold. And there was something about Ethan Barrett, a steadiness, an integrity that made her trust him despite having just met. "I think Mr. Barrett's offer is our best hope," she finally said. Ethan nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "We leave tomorrow at dawn. Pack light but bring warm clothes. Nights get cold on the prairie." As Ethan stood to leave, Zara followed him to the door. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not many men would have stepped in like you did." "Not many men deserve to be called men," Ethan replied, settling his hat on his head. "I'll return in the morning with the wagon." After he left, Zara watched his tall figure move down the street, wondering what twist of fate had brought Ethan Barrett to her rescue and what the coming weeks might hold. Dawn broke clear and cool the next morning as Zara secured the last of their belongings in the wagon Ethan had provided. Her father was inside the store, leaving final instructions with their neighbor who had agreed to check on the property during their absence. Ready for the adventure. Zara turned to find Ethan leading 2 saddled horses, his expression friendly but guarded. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, tugging her shawl tighter against the morning chill. "Though I must admit, I've never been farther than 20 miles from Miles City." "The trail can be hard," Ethan acknowledged, "but there's nothing quite like seeing the land stretch out before you, knowing each day brings new vistas." His eyes held a hint of passion when he spoke of the land, and Zara found herself wondering what other depths lay beneath his composed exterior. "Ethan," a female voice called from down the street. A woman approached, her practical riding clothes and confident stride marking her immediately as someone at home in the saddle. "The supply wagon's loaded and the men are gathering the herd outside town." "Perfect timing," Ethan said. "Zara, this is my sister Charlotte. Charlotte, this is Zara Kingsley and her father Joseph, who will be joining our drive." Charlotte's handshake was firm, her smile genuine. At perhaps 26, she had the same green eyes as her brother, though her hair was a shade darker than Ethan's light brown. "Thank heavens," Charlotte said. "I was dreading another month of being the only woman among 20 cowhands. They're good men, but their conversation tends to revolve around cattle, cards, and the weather." Joseph emerged from the store, locking the door behind him. After brief introductions, they mounted up Joseph and Zara on the horses Ethan had brought, while Ethan and Charlotte rode ahead to lead them to the gathering herd. As they left the small town behind, Zara felt a curious mixture of trepidation and excitement. The open country stretched before them, golden in the early light, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of the store and her confined existence lift slightly. The cattle drive was nothing like Zara had imagined. By midday, she understood why Charlotte's practical attire was necessary. The dust kicked up by hundreds of hooves coated everything, and the constant motion of the herd required everyone's attention. Zara rode alongside the chuck wagon that Charlotte managed, learning the rhythms of the drive. Each cowhand had specific duties, and Ethan oversaw it all with a quiet authority that inspired loyalty without demanding it. "Your brother seems to have earned the men's respect," Zara observed as she helped Charlotte prepare the midday meal. Charlotte nodded, expertly slicing salt pork for the beans. Ethan fought with the Confederacy not for the cause, but because Texas was home. After the war, he refused to surrender to bitterness like so many did. Instead, he worked himself nearly to death to build something honest. "And the scar?" Zara asked hesitantly. "Shiloh," Charlotte replied simply. "He doesn't talk about it much." That evening, camped beside a small creek, Zara sat near the fire while her father discussed the drive's logistics with Ethan. The cowhands, tired from the day's work, nevertheless maintained a cheerful atmosphere, one man strumming a guitar while others played cards. "Miss Kingsley," Ethan approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want this. The nights get chilly." "Thank you," she said, accepting the steaming cup. "And please call me Zara. After all, we'll be traveling together for weeks." Ethan settled beside her, his long legs stretched toward the fire. "Your father's a good man. He speaks highly of you." "He sacrificed a lot to raise me after my mother died," Zara said. "I was only 10 when we lost her to fever. Father could have sent me east to relatives, but he kept me with him, even when it meant living in a tent during the early days of Miles City." "That kind of loyalty is rare," Ethan observed, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "It's why I stepped in yesterday. A man willing to harm a woman isn't worthy of respect, let alone her hand." "You and Edward seem to have history beyond yesterday," Zara ventured. Ethan was silent for a long moment. "Victor Blackburn tried to take my ranch 2 years ago. When legal means failed, Edward and some hired guns killed half my breeding stock and poisoned a water hole. His voice remained level, but Zara could sense the controlled anger beneath. I couldn't prove it was them, but everyone knew. I'm sorry, Zara said softly. Don't be. The Barrett ranch survived and we're thriving now. But I learned a valuable lesson about the Blackburns. They never forget a slight, and they never stop wanting what they can't have. Zara shivered, not entirely from the cooling night air. You think Edward will pursue this matter? I know he will, Ethan said, his gaze meeting hers. But you're safe with us, Zara. I give you my word on that. Something in his tone, a protective certainty, comforted her. As the stars emerged in the vast sky above, Zara realized that for all her initial misgivings, she felt more secure here, among strangers in the wilderness, than she had in town under the shadow of Edward's obsession. Days blended into one another as the drive continued north toward the railhead. Zara's soft hands grew calloused from work, and her fair skin tanned from hours under the sun. She learned to cook for 20 hungry men over an open fire, to spot approaching weather in the distant clouds, and to appreciate the camaraderie that formed among people facing common challenges. She also found herself increasingly drawn to Ethan Barrett. Unlike Edward's polished arrogance, Ethan carried himself with a quiet dignity that required no announcement. He worked alongside his men, ate the same food, and slept under the same stars. When he spoke, people listened not because they feared him, but because they respected him. One evening, as the drive paused near a bend in the river, Ethan invited Zara to ride with him to check the far perimeter of the herd. Charlotte says you've become indispensable, he said as they rode side by side, the setting sun painting the landscape in amber and gold. The men have never eaten so well. Zara laughed, more comfortable in the saddle now than she would have believed possible 2 weeks ago. Your sister is too generous. I'm still learning, but I enjoy the work more than I expected. There's something satisfying about feeding hungry people who appreciate every bite. It's different from the store, entirely, Zara confirmed. At the store, I was always behind the counter, watching life happen around me. Here, I feel part of something larger. They crested a small rise, and Ethan reined in his horse. Below them, the herd grazed peacefully along the river's edge, the cowhands positioned strategically around its perimeter. Beyond, the land rolled away toward distant mountains, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. This is why I could never live in town, Ethan said quietly. Some men need walls around them to feel secure. I need this open space, room to breathe. Zara studied his profile against the sunset. I think I'm beginning to understand that feeling. Ethan turned to her, something unspoken in his eyes. For a moment, Zara thought he might say more, but a shout from below drew their attention. One of the cowhands was waving urgently. Something's wrong, Ethan said, immediately alert. Stay close. They rode down quickly to discover that a small group of riders had been spotted approaching from the east, unusual, as they were far from any settlement or regular trail. How many? Ethan asked the lookout. 6, maybe 7, the cowhand replied. Riding hard. Ethan's expression darkened. Get back to the main camp. Tell the men to be ready, but no one fires unless I give the order. As the riders drew closer, Zara felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Even at a distance, she recognized the lead rider's posture, Edward Blackburn, and he wasn't alone. It's him, she whispered to Ethan. I see that, Ethan replied grimly. Stay behind me. Edward and his men reined in their horses about 20 yards away, dust billowing around them. Edward's face was set in cold determination, his expensive suit replaced by practical riding clothes that did nothing to disguise his purpose. Barrett, he called. I've come for what's mine. Ethan stepped forward, his stance casual but his right hand resting near his holstered revolver. Nothing here belongs to you, Blackburn. Edward's gaze fixed on Zara. The woman comes with me. Her father's debts have been legally transferred to my possession. She's collateral and I'm collecting. That's not how the law works, Ethan countered. And even if it did, you'd have to go through me first. Edward smiled thinly. I was hoping you'd say that, he gestured to his men. I have a legal document and 6 witnesses. What do you have, Barrett? 20 loyal men, Ethan replied evenly, and the knowledge that no judge would enforce a contract binding a woman against her will, especially not to a man known for violence. Edward's face flushed with anger. You're calling me violent, rich, coming from a man who threatened me at gunpoint. To prevent you from striking a defenseless woman, Ethan reminded him. Zara stepped forward, ignoring Ethan's warning glance. I am not defenseless and I am not property to be claimed, Mr. Blackburn. Whatever agreement you think you have with my father, it does not include me. Edward's cold eyes narrowed. Your opinion matters little, Zara. The law requires my consent, Zara interrupted, her voice steadier than she felt. Which I do not and will never give. Edward dismounted, his movements controlled but tense with anger. His men remained on horseback, hands hovering near their weapons. Your father owes a debt, Edward said, advancing slowly. One way or another it will be paid. We're arranging payment, Ethan said, moving to stand between Edward and Zara. Joseph Kingsley is earning honest wages on this drive. Not enough, not fast enough, Edward snapped. My father wants resolution now. Your father, Ethan said deliberately, has wanted to destroy the Kingsleys for years, ever since Joseph refused to sell his prime location on Front Street. This isn't about debt, Blackburn, it's about control. Edward's face contorted with fury. You know nothing about my father's business. I know everything about your father's methods, Ethan replied. The same methods you used against my ranch: intimidation, sabotage, violence when necessary. Something dangerous flashed in Edward's eyes. His hand moved suddenly, reaching inside his jacket. In a fluid motion too fast to follow, Ethan's revolver appeared in his palm, cocked and aimed at Edward's chest. Don't, he warned quietly. The air between them seemed to vibrate with tension. Edward froze, his hand still inside his jacket. I'm not reaching for a gun, Edward said slowly. Just the papers proving my claim. Show me slowly, Ethan instructed, his revolver unwavering. Edward produced a folded document, holding it up. Legal transfer of debt signed by the territorial judge himself. The Kingsley property and assets are forfeit, including any labor contract Joseph Kingsley might enter. Let me see that, came Joseph's voice as he approached from the camp, Charlotte by his side. Edward handed over the document with a smirk. It's all perfectly legal. Joseph studied the paper, his expression growing increasingly troubled. This includes a clause I never agreed to making Zara part of the collateral. A minor addition, Edward dismissed. The judge saw no issue with it. Because you didn't show him that clause, Charlotte interjected, her keen eyes examining the document over Joseph's shoulder. This ink is fresher than the rest. You added it after the judge signed. Edward's confident smile faltered slightly. Prove it. We will, Ethan said firmly. At the territorial court in Helena. Until then, the Kingsleys remain under my protection. Edward's composure cracked. I've had enough of your interference, Barrett. His hand darted to his side, drawing a small derringer from his belt. The next moments blurred into chaos. Ethan fired a warning shot into the ground at Edward's feet. Edward stumbled back, his own shot going wide. His men reached for their weapons, but froze when they found themselves facing the rifles of Ethan's cowhands, who had quietly surrounded the confrontation. Drop it, Blackburn, Ethan ordered, his gun still trained on Edward. You're outmanned and outgunned. For a tense moment, Edward seemed ready to risk everything. Then, slowly, he lowered the derringer. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, it is, came a new voice from behind Edward's men. Everyone turned to see 3 riders approaching a marshal and 2 deputies, their badges catching the fading sunlight. Marshal Davis, Ethan acknowledged with a nod. Good timing. The marshal dismounted, his weathered face grim. Got your message about possible trouble, Barrett. Seems I arrived just in time. He glanced at Edward's dropped derringer, pulling a hidden weapon during a dispute. That's attempted murder in these parts. He drew first, Edward protested, pointing at Ethan. After you reached for a concealed weapon, Charlotte countered. We all saw it. Marshal Davis collected the derringer. I've also received some interesting information about forged legal documents circulating in the territory. This wouldn't happen to be one, would it? He gestured to the paper still in Joseph's hands. Altered after signing, Joseph confirmed, handing it over. The marshal examined it carefully. Document tampering, another serious charge. He nodded to his deputies. Take Mr. Blackburn and his men into custody. We'll sort this out properly in Helena. As Edward was led away in handcuffs, his venomous glare fixed on Zara and Ethan. My father will destroy you both for this. Your father, Marshal Davis said casually, is already under investigation by the territorial governor. It seems his influence isn't what it used to be. Only after Edward and his men disappeared down the trail with the marshal and deputies did the tension break. The cowhands returned to their posts, while Joseph embraced his daughter in relief. How did the marshal know to come? Zara asked Ethan as they walked back toward camp. I sent a rider ahead 3 days ago, Ethan admitted. I suspected Edward might try something like this. You knew he would follow us, Ethan nodded. Men like Edward can't stand losing what they believe is theirs. I've seen it before. Thank you, Zara said softly. Not just for today, but for everything. In the firelight that evening, the atmosphere around camp was celebratory but subdued. The confrontation had ended peacefully, but everyone understood how close they had come to bloodshed. Zara found Ethan sitting alone at the edge of camp, staring at the star-filled sky. May I join you? She asked. He nodded, making space on the fallen log where he sat. You showed great courage today. As did you, Zara replied. I've been wondering, though, why did you really help us? It can't just be because my father outfitted your first cattle drive. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When I returned from the war, I was broken in ways that had nothing to do with this scar, he finally said, touching his jaw. I'd seen too much death, too much cruelty. I promised myself that if I ever rebuilt my life, I wouldn't stand by while others suffered injustice. Is that the only reason? Zara asked, her heart beating faster. Ethan turned to her, his expression serious yet tender. No, he admitted. From the moment I saw you stand up to Edward, afraid but unwilling to submit, I admired your spirit. These past weeks, watching you adapt to this hard life without complaint, that admiration has grown into something more. Something more, Zara echoed, hardly daring to hope. Ethan took her hand gently. I never expected to find someone like you, Zara Kingsley, someone who appreciates the beauty of this land as I do, someone who faces challenges with grace and determination. Are you saying? I'm saying I care for you, Ethan said simply. More than I thought possible after such a short time, and when this drive is over and your father's debts are settled, I'd like to court you properly if you're willing. Zara felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. I'd like that very much, Ethan Barrett. Under the vast Montana sky, with the gentle sounds of the cattle drive settling for the night around them, Zara leaned closer to Ethan. His arm encircled her shoulders, protective yet gentle, and she knew with sudden clarity that she had found not just safety but the possibility of love. The remaining journey to the railhead passed without incident. Edward Blackburn and his men faced territorial justice, and Victor Blackburn's influence crumbled as investigations revealed years of corruption and intimidation. Joseph Kingsley's work on the drive, combined with Ethan's generous payment, eliminated the most pressing debts. When they returned to Miles City, the store reopened with renewed prosperity, as many townsfolk chose to support the Kingsleys over the Blackburns' businesses. True to his word, Ethan courted Zara with respectful patience. Their shared experience had forged a bond that deepened with each passing month. Zara found herself eagerly anticipating his visits from the Barrett ranch, and when he was away, she studied ranch management and cattle breeding, determined to be a true partner if their relationship continued to flourish. On a crisp autumn day, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, Ethan proposed beside the same creek where they had camped during the cattle drive. Zara accepted without hesitation. They were married the following spring, with Charlotte as maid of honor and Joseph proudly walking his daughter down the aisle. The Barrett ranch became Zara's new home, though she often helped her father at the store when Ethan's business brought them to town. Years later, with 2 children playing in the yard of their expanded ranch house, Zara would sometimes recall that fateful morning when a raised hand of anger had been stopped by a gun in a stranger's palm. What had begun as a moment of fear had transformed into a lifetime of love, a love as vast and enduring as the Montana sky above them. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan would ask, finding her on the porch watching their children, and Zara would smile, taking his hand in hers. "About how sometimes, the moments that seem most dangerous can lead us exactly where we're meant to be."